Hello, dear friends. Thank you so much for joining us. We are running a little bit behind schedule, but you all know how technical difficulties are in life. But nevertheless, we are here now with you today. So, welcome to another episode of Lead Voice, where we come together and we have the discussions about leadership that maybe we're thinking about, but we may not always be talking about and speaking about. So, I am here. My name is Rhonda Y. Williams. I'm CEO of ATG Leadership. I am based just outside of Dallas, Texas. Excited to be here with my dear friend and my co-host from Kenya, Dr. Juma. Say hello.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, our friends, our audience, wherever you are, all the viewers. We welcome you to these lead voice conversations. They are accurately accurate for all of us that exist at a time like this. So we welcome you with a lot of humility. In Kenya, we always say, Karibu sana.
Karibu sana. Thank you so much. And we've got a good one today. So we're going to dive into our discussion because today we're going to be talking about the ego. We're going to be talking about the ego in leadership. What is it? How does it show up when ego is starting to rise? How do we know it so that we can identify it? And then we're going to talk about some of the challenges that come up. Ego is not always a bad thing. We all have it, and there's a positive side to it as well. So we'll speak about some of that, and then we will also talk a little bit about what should we do, right? If we see the negative side of that ego come up, what should we do? So let's dive in first. And Dr. Juma, I'm going to ask you to just start off by sharing with us a little bit about your thoughts on what is ego and why should we even care?
Well, this has been one of the most reflective moments for me, actually, when we agreed that we need to talk about this topic. From the time we agreed that our conversation this particular time, as we close the year, I think should center on ego and the leader. And I have been reflecting, and one of the things I do believe, I want to be very ruthless and honest to myself more than I would perhaps speak to anybody, because this is one of the topic that even before you speak to anybody, you need to look at yourself and really ask yourself, is ego slacking you down, or are you really the one mastering ego? So possibly just to be more brief, everyone, at least one out of one of every human being has an ego. In my reflection, I came to discover that this is not something that you can say is strange to you. It is not something that you can say it is for a particular individual. Whether you are a leader in a position, or you are aspiring to be a leader, or you are not in any position or leadership, if you are a human being, you have it existing in you. And in my reflection, I came to discover that it can be looked at on two perspectives. One, positively, it can be a drive. It is that drive that will always cause you to achieve something or have something. It is a drive. You can look at it in that particular sense of what makes you go for that dream. And on the other hand, it can also be a sense of superiority that exceeds the bounds of confidence and even talent or abilities that you have. So it can be looked on that aspect. And so when we are talking about ego, it can be an enemy or it can be a friend, depending on how you are going to either allow it to lead you or you lead it. So we're going to, of course, dissect into, and from this perspective of the negativity part, it is an healthy belief in our own importance. That's what I can say. that unhealthy belief in how important we are. And it can reflect itself in our arrogance, in our self-centered ambition. So ego can be defined or looked at as that drive that wants you to get your way regardless of who or what you will do. And you want to be better, you want to be more than the other person. And that one to me is on the negative aspect. And possibly you can add on it, but I feel like we should concentrate on this aspect whereby ego is not channeled to bring the good that ought to be there.
Yeah. So, Dr. Juma, you said a lot there, and I love how you described it, the unhealthy side as the unhealthy belief in your own importance, right? So, you have a sort of done a bit of self-aggrandizing where you have elevated yourself potentially above the needs or importance or value of everyone else. When I think of ego is that part of us that thrives on recognition, being visible and being seen, acknowledged. Ego is the part of us that really wants to be in control, right? It's almost like the child, a little bit of the child in us who's constantly seeking to be in control. And as you mentioned, there is the two sides of the ego. So for everyone out there, we all have egos. We're not saying that having an ego is a bad thing because, I mean, let's face it. Who would go? Here's a couple of clear examples, Dr. Juma. You have to have a bit of an ego to believe you could be the president of the United States. Okay. You have to have a bit of an ego to believe that you could lead the country of Kenya, right? So you have to have ego, which is a bit of confidence and really a self-belief, in who you are, your skills, abilities, and what you bring to the table in order to hold some of these important roles. You have to have ego to be able to build confidence that you can do certain things. So that's the positive side of ego. But then there's the other side and the dark side. So we're going to dive in and talk a little bit more about the dark side of the ego. Before we do, I want to share, I always like to think of what are the real life examples of leaders that we've seen, studies that show us the challenges that might come with some of our discussion topics. Here's one. Steve Jobs is the creator of Apple. And he's often one that people look at as a leader who had both sides of that ego on display. He had the healthy part of the ego, meaning he was very confident in his ability to create and develop and innovate. He also had the unhealthy side of the ego where people saw a lot of personal and interpersonal challenges and dynamics that were not healthy, which also caused him to be removed from his own company, right? So both sides of the ego play a role. So that's kind of how we describe ego. Here's something to think about, Dr. Juma. According to Gallup, 50% of employees leave their job to escape bad managers, which is often the result of ego-driven behaviors, right? So ego has an impact on us, on our lives. How many parents out there are operating in an overly inflated egoic way with their children, with their others in their family, and driving wedges between people? So lots we can talk about with this. Let's move on though, Dr. Juma. I want to ask you about how does it show up? So when we are operating out of the negative aspect of ego, how does that show up for us?
Well, it manifests itself in many ways. And the most evident one is the aspect where you find if you are in leadership, you tend to demean and belittle others. It's like you don't subscribe to everyone has value, you see, because nobody is valueless under the sun. Everyone has value. But ego kind of inflames your importance. And you are like, you have it all, or rather you are the one that knows, or you are the one that is in the position and you can enforce it. And now ultimately you see that you miss the support, the loyalty, and even the fruitfulness that ought to come out of your very service or your very influence or your very leadership. So it manifests in this particular behavior whereby you belittle and you take advantage of the benefit of the position you are in, or of the privileges that you enjoy in a particular position. And in that aspect, you do what you think is right to you without considering others. So ego will always make you, see things to you, you feel they are right.
Yeah.
But actually, they are wrong because you can blame everybody else. You can blame anything else. And that is the manifestation of ego. You find yourself running to blame somebody or running to blame something, but you can never confront ruthlessly and honestly appreciate that possibly it is your inadequacy, it is your inconsistency. Ego will always make you to feel like you have it, you know it, and what you want is the one that should actually come out. That is the manifestation of ego.
Wow. So, I was thinking about the blame thing also. So, when you're operating in that very overinflated sort of egoic way, one of the things that we tend to do is it's everyone else's fault. It's not me. Wasn't me. Don't look here. There's nothing to see here. Everybody look over there, right? At someone else. So that part is really important. The other part is, so when we're talking about leaders and how this shows up, let's say you're in the office, in a workspace, running a government, however that is, you might tend to micromanage because you believe that you are the one that can do it right. Only you know how you want it done. You micromanage your people to the point where they feel stifled, they feel undervalued, they don't feel recognized and appreciated for the skills and the wisdom that they bring to the role, right? That's all sort of ego. You overinflate your achievements, not just overinflate your achievements, but to the detriment of everyone else. Meaning, look at me, look how good I am, look how wonderful I am. Nobody is as good or as wonderful as me, right? Those are all sort of ego-driven behaviors. Maybe you make decisions because you are the ultimate wise one, right? Nobody else needs to give you input. Nobody needs to give you feedback, right? You are the one because why not? I know the answer. I'll just make the decision and tell everyone else, right? So these are all manifestations of when we are operating in that sort of that high level, in that place of ego. I think about this, and I'm going to ask you what you think about this, Dr. Juma. As we were just talking, it sort of came to me that a lot of what we're describing, right? Belittling, but blaming, taking advantage of your position. It feels like it is a self-protecting mechanism that is malfunctioning, right? We all have a degree of self-protecting, right? It's how we live, it's how we survive. But when you do that to the detriment of others, so what do you think about that? Do you think it's a self-protecting mechanism that is unnoticed and where people don't realize how damaging it is?
Actually, you're right, because for me, it's protective of most of the time our inadequacies. There are certain inadequacies and inconsistencies. We may not want them to be so much revealed out, and therefore it is one of the powerful way to protect ourselves, so that those who we feel should see our importance do not see the other weak part of us. And for me, it actually works against our own growth, our own influence to the very people that we ought to influence. So you are right. It is actually a protective. It's a mask in one way. It is masking us from the real us.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say hi to Achiever Wisdom says, well, thank you so much for joining us. If you're out there watching, don't forget to comment. Tell us where you're watching from. Add your comments. What's your experience been with leaders? Damaris is out there also. Hey, Damaris, thanks so much for tuning in. He says, amazing. So let's talk a little bit about, so we know what ego is. We know how it tends to show up. Let's talk a little bit about why we as leaders need to, number one, pay attention to it, be aware of it. What potentially is the damage that this overinflated sense of ego could cause when it shows up, Dr. Juma?
It destroys a lot when you are a leader, because first of all, it repulses the opportunity you have to influence people to achieve a particular dream. In other words, it frustrates the effort, the vision you are driving across. It also, it's a magnet of enemies. Allow me to say that it's a magnet. It gives your enemies greater advantage, because when you are egoistic, or egomaniac. I don't know which is the right word that I can extract from that, because there are those who are just egomaniac. Even when you try to help them, they can never see the sense. It is so much in them that, you can never be creative at the same time. You are trying to be creative to find an answer, but at the same time, you are so critical on your creativity in a wrong way. So I want to say that, yes, when it comes to leadership, ego, when it is in power, it will always frustrate every effort you are putting in. Opportunities and advantages that ought to come even to yourself, you will not see them, because it's a blindness that covers you, and you are in your own world. You are not in the world of realism. You are not truthful to yourself, and therefore it is so hard for you to really accomplish what ought to be accomplished. Most of the time, the decision you make because of that ego will be wrong. The decision you make will always be coercive. The actions you take will always be received with either rebellion or resistance. Now, it makes the vision a task impossible. That's what I can say. It makes things just not able to move. It undermines the journey you are in. And somebody said it's a voice that tells us we are better, but actually we are worse in reality.
Oh boy. There's a lot to unpack there, and all of those things, right? All of those things are so true. And I want everyone listening right now, I have a question for you. Here's my question. Where is your ego not allowing you to see your own flaws that are holding you back? Where is your ego not allowing you to see your own flaws that are holding you back? So we've been talking about, sort of ego and the negative aspects, and Ray, hey Ray, thanks for joining us again. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a confidence booster. There's a fine line between being egotistic and taking the lead. Actions are not always destructive. It depends on the situations. Yeah. So in the beginning, Ray, we talked about the dual edge of ego, the positive and the destructive side. So on in this conversation, we're focusing on the destructive side, recognizing full well that ego has a positive aspect and a positive role to play in all of our lives. But so back to the question, where is ego not allowing you to see the flaws that are standing in your own way? And so I think about this, Dr. Juma, and I think about what people fear, right? I fear being wrong. I fear others looking at me some kind of way. I fear others having a negative perception of me. I fear not having the ability that everyone thinks I have. I fear being wrong. I fear all of these things. And therefore, I need to be right. I need to be right. And that's when that negative ego steps up, because if I'm wrong, oh my goodness, what does it mean about me? What does it say about me? Will people trust me? Will they believe in me? Maybe they think I'm in the wrong seat. Maybe they believe I don't deserve this leadership position. Maybe they believe all of these things if I admit that I'm wrong. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to always be right. And I'm going to show this overinflated confidence, right? Even when times that it's not deserving. So I just ask everybody to consider that question, because we have ego that shows up positively in our lives, but sometimes it holds us back. I know people who cannot recognize, hear, accept, own their own contribution to situations, and therefore it remains a barrier to their success, right? It remains a barrier to holding you back. Here's an example. So years ago, I was married for 25 years and I got divorced. So you talked about today on this show program, we're going to be transparent, right?
Sure.
25 years ago. Some years ago, I was married for 25 years and then ended up getting a divorce. And so we got a divorce based on a catalyst, right? A situation that sort of catalyzed and brought it forward. And on the outside, it was very easy to look externally and say, I had nothing to do with that. That was not me, was not my behavior. Someone else is at fault. Instead, what I chose to do is I asked myself, what was my contribution, right? Because a relationship is two people, right?
Sure.
And yeah, we each have our own behaviors, but what was my contribution? What I didn't want to do is to step back and say, it wasn't me. I had nothing to do with it. Just because I didn't do this one thing doesn't mean I didn't do something over here that was contributing. And if I could step back and recognize that, would that put me in a better position going forward to not experience the same thing? So ego, I had to, and this was not easy, right? This was not easy, because it was very easy to point fingers at everyone else and the other person and say, it's you. But I forced myself to do that reflective look. And I'm really glad that I did that, because, those times of reflection can only make us better. So let me ask you your thoughts on what I just shared.
You see, it's good to be honest, because we can't run away from ourselves and what has also happened. And many things happen to us for us, because I'm very sure when you began to reflect on what is my contribution to this particular results that have taken place, it's a reality now. You are no longer living in illusion. It is a reality that at one time we are sharing life with this person, but there was myriad of issues, and each one of us in one way participated. And for me, I do believe that one was a good way to kill your own personal ego and translate it into growth, because you had option to protect yourself and pose yourself as the smart one, the correct one, you get it. But you see, it was good that you asked a very key question. And this reminds me of, I do believe this should be John Maxwell, who said, great people always ask a great question. And for me, I do believe you are a great woman. You asked a great question. And that great question was just very simple. What was my contribution in this? And I think every one of us should be honest to ask that question. That at the end of it, whether you are winning or losing, any loser, any winner in life, ego is behind all those particular two things. At one time, somebody is winning. When you look at it critically, there was an ego that was driving that particular, you get it. Somebody who is losing, look very clearly. there were certain particular things which may be associated to ego. You've just spoken to us, the fear of this, and all that kind of fears, they can actually make you lose. So for me, my comment to that is, well, congratulations, you have actually wisened up out of all that, and this is because you were able to look at yourself and ask a great question.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's one, so sort of repeat. It's not that it's easy, right? Because this need to protect yourself, and when you're in a delicate state and a fragile state, it's even stronger to protect yourself and sort of put yourself in a bit of a cocoon, but there's no growth there, right? If you stay in that cocoon, there's no growth there. So I also want to make a point clear. Asking yourself that question is what was my contribution is not the same as taking the blame for it. Because what people will say is that, well, I wasn't to blame. That's not the question. The question isn't who's to blame, right? We're talking about contributing factors, and that's it. It's just a reflective question. So I want to just acknowledge Dorcas, who says that this was great. Thank you so much for watching. And Ruth says, well done. Thank you, Ruth. It was actually very difficult. So even speaking about it now, I think about, gosh, how did I get myself to that point? I'm pretty sure there was a glass of wine somewhere that I had first, right? Joseph is out there as well and says, powerful conversation. Thank you, Joseph, for tuning in again. So Dr. Juma, if we think about all of these elements of ego, I have another sort of example for us. And Jeff is out there. Hey, Jeff, thanks so much for tuning in. Wonderful to have you joining us. Here's another example of ego. So when you are building an organization, and many of us are entrepreneurs and in some phase of building a business, building, companies, the ego is really, really important in this. So we know you have ego because you have the confidence to believe that you can build a business or a company. That's a good thing, right? That's that positive ego. But we also know that if you are the one that's building this organization, it's really incumbent on you to pay attention to that ego and not allow it to get into check. So there was a company here called WeWork. And it was kind of like a collaborative space where people come in, right? You can take a office there for a day, or sort of rent one out for a week or whatever. And it was this very cooperative, collaborative working space, and they were doing really well. But apparently, the owner of this, they said, had, quote, unchecked ego. And he went on this spending spree where he was just spending money that they thought was reckless. He was setting unrealistic goals for occupancy and things like that for the team. And eventually, under his leadership and his ego, it all came crumbling down. So you took what started off as a very successful venture where people were excited and thought it had great potential and opportunity, to the leader not keeping his ego in check. At least this is according to reports. And then the whole thing collapsing and crumbling. So if you're out there building a business, really important, your organization the fate of your organization may be determined by how you're able to keep your ego in check. So that's something that's important for us to consider. So
actually,
sure.
Let me intercept there, because we have already established that ego is very powerful.
Yes.
Either way, it can become a vice. Yeah. It can become an asset depending on how you manage and depending on how you'll handle it and channel it. So when you're talking about, as a business and entrepreneur person, now you see, there are so many of us business people or other individuals who are in business that get upset because of not managing this particular ego. You are upset because you had this goal, you had this investment, and somehow, somewhere, it has not brought the result that you really desired it to. And, I sat down because I also am in entrepreneurship, and I came to discover that, Rhonda, sometimes when you look at some of this frustration we get, it is because of ego. over investment, under investment. All these, when you look at the heart of what really inspired us, you can imagine it can be our egoistic
Right.
aspect. You get it? And then because we are not able to subject our ego, it takes toll on us, and we become so upset, and we become irritating personalities in the company. And as we become irritating personalities in the company, what does that mean? Even the potential client, the potential customer, now that we have become irritating personalities in the company, we can no longer have the magnet to, attract that which
Right.
is give us business. And I think that's why this conversation is very key and very helpful. We are not, even if we could not talk to anyone of our audience, I do believe you and I can share into this particular truth. And come to the government officials. Sometimes you look at how they offer services and you realize, where is humility? Where is responsibility? Where is respect to humanity? This is your fellow human being coming for service. You exist in that position to offer service, but you are a total contradiction because of ego. Ego gives you a certain conceited, attitude that treats your fellow human being like a trash.
Yeah.
Why are all these? Ego. I want you to see we are talking here, and let me also give my personal experience, because you have also given yours. At one time, I was a teacher, and I think it is in the nature of teachers when you teach. I don't know, but most who have been in this profession, it is very easy when you are a teacher, the mindset of a teacher, to be so strong in you, to the extent that when you come home, you treat everybody in the home like a pupil or a student. Now, I am confessing this to my own embarrassment and to the embarrassment of the ego that was really controlling me, because having been a teacher and interacting with the students, I am used to giving them instruction 1, instruction 2. Right. I developed the same mentality, and even when I come to my family, to my wife, I find myself subconsciously giving the same instruction, expecting the same response. When I don't get the same response, you can imagine what I would do. You can imagine it becomes a home of war and conflict, only to come later on to realize that, honestly, I was not managing my ego.
Right. Oh my goodness. Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us, because these real life examples, I think, are helpful. We can see where our egos come up and how we can manage them. And these are ways that we can reflect on. So everyone out there, I hope you're reflecting on taking a look at your own life. Where's your ego showing up? I want to say hi and recognize a few people. Alex is out there. She said, amazing work and ego. I'm learning. Thank you for joining us. Joseph is out there, said, I'm learning to deal with my ego in a positive way. And then Favor's out there also. Hey, Favor, great to see you. Well done for this discussion, long overdue. This should be shared with all leaders. So as you were speaking, there was whole nother topic that came to mind, which was power, right? The topic of leadership and power. And, yes, sort of how we sort of deal with that power. But anyway, I also, as you were speaking, thought about this term when you were talking about ego. So as entrepreneurs, we have things on our financial book. So ask yourself, is ego for you an asset, or is your ego a liability? And I would actually say, if you want to be bold, you should go ask other people, because your vision may be clouded. You may think that your ego is an asset, while everybody else around you is thinking your ego is a liability. And that disconnect, this is where phrases like, I don't care what anybody else thinks, or don't care what anybody thinks about you. Those are nonsense. Please eliminate those phrases from your vocabulary. They're nonsense. I get it. Like, you don't want to be driven internally by what others think of you, but you absolutely need to care what your friends, your family, your colleagues, those that count on you, you absolutely need to care what they think about you. And if you don't, then I say maybe you're a hermit that should live on an island alone in the middle of the ocean, right? Because as long as there are people around you and you have a community, then we should be caring about our impact on other people. So if you want to be big, somebody type yes in the comments. If you are bold enough to go ask 3 people, if they believe your ego is an asset or a liability, and ask them for their honest feedback. And here's the key. Here is the key. When they answer, the only thing I want you to say is thank you. I don't want you to debate it. I don't want you to have a whole conversation about why. I don't want you to talk about your past experience. The only response, here's your question. Do you believe that my ego is an asset or a liability? And then quietly listen to what they share. And then at the end, thank you, period, end of conversation. Nothing else. You're just looking for feedback. So I'm interested to see if anybody's going to take me up on that offer to go boldly find out what other people think about your ego. Because I can guarantee you what you think about your ego and what other people think about it is probably 2 different worlds. What do you think about that, Dr. Juma?
It is good. It was Shakespeare. I think it was Shakespeare who said, above all, to thy own self be true. And I think that one's a good assignment that we should go for, including myself. It's very liberating. I will discover that even in my humility, there is an ego. Even in my humility and humbleness, there is an ego. So it is good that we actually have friends who are genuine enough, who can look at us and say, yeah, there is a liability here. There is a liability here. There is a liability here. Your ego is not making an asset out of you. It is making a liability out of you. So I think it should be for our audience, be bold enough to ask 3 people, as my good friend and host has just, helped us. Go to 3 individuals and ask them whether your ego indeed is an asset or a liability. You will be helped, you will be shocked, you will be surprised, but you will also say thank you.
Absolutely. I love that. So I think people are enjoying this conversation. Joseph, yes, we are recording. This will live on Facebook where you're watching it. So you'll be able to go back there and watch it from the beginning. And you'll also be able to share it with others. Alex said, for me, it's a liability. And that's great recognition on your part, Alex. But still do the exercise. Go ask 3 people, because maybe 2 of them say it's an asset. Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. But the idea is to just get the information. Diana said, am I ready for the answer? I don't know, Diana. Are you? Are you ready for the answer? It can be very scary. And Alex said, good and realistic practical examples. Okay, so we're going to go into our final session. That was really fun. And I had no idea that was going to come up. That was not in the planning of this discussion. But that is, I think, the power of the dynamic relationship that Dr. Juma and I have, where we just sort of on the fly bring things up that we feel like might be useful for you. So as we step into our final discussion point here, let's say, for instance, I go ask my people, I do my self-reflection, and I determine that my ego is a liability. Oh no, what now? So first, it's not the end of the world. And in fact, I would say that's a good thing, because you now have information that you didn't have before. But Dr. Juma, what's the solution to helping us get that ego back in check?
Yeah, there's quite a number of, strategies. At first, I wanted to tell you that in my own personal definition of ego, easing God out.
Yeah. Wow.
In my own personal definition from my spiritual anchor. I always say, ego is easing God out.
Oh,
That's
wow. All right. Did y'all catch that? Ego is easing God out. That's his own personal definition of ego. So
so now
fantastic.
if you want an answer, let God be in. God is the reality, is the truth. And most of the time you realize that ego is destructive when we are operating out of reality.
Mhm.
But when we operate in truth, when we operate in realism, we are not embarrassed. We are actually refined by the truth we get. You can be great and still be humble. Yes. You can cultivate how to get out of this destructive aspect of ego. You can manage and channel and direct your drive in the right particular direction. And so we begin by being humble in your aspiration is a way forward. You have to be a person that embraces humility so that you keep yourself in your position, in the vision. Humility is always a facilitator of greatness. And so it's a virtue. The reason why we are conversing here on ego is that, every virtue begins with understanding. Once you understand that our ego can be very powerful and also very destructive, you are already on your path to liberating yourself from the destructive effects of ego. So I should say being humble and gracious in our successes, in our positions of influence is a key virtue of taming ego in our lives, that you will also be mindful to others. And this one I always say, it is civility. You can be different. You can be different in all aspects, but also very respectful, so that your differences can make a difference. You are in a higher position, higher than me. We are totally in different places, but we can still make a difference. You don't have to belittle me for your importance to be celebrated. No, you can actually cultivate this particular culture of civility and be gracious and respectful to my difference, and I be respectful to your difference. You can restrain yourself from that which makes you feel more important. This is how we actually benefit from ego. This is how we make it not to disrupt our life. We must also, I should say, we must also develop a student mindset. And this is what has really helped me personally. There is no time I have overrated myself. I believe in learning. I believe in learning even to those who are junior to me. So this mindset helps to keep every ego in me in check. I become a tutor, a teacher, and a critique to my own self, because I am willing to learn. Without an open spirit, open mindset in learning to absorb what is around you and to get the right perspective, you will always mess out with ego. Possibly those, I stop there for now. I don't know how you view it, but I think for me, that's how ego can be tamed.
Yeah, no, I think that's really powerful, what you've shared. And we have a couple of comments here. So Maddox says, fire is being humble. Absolutely. I think we don't talk enough about humility and the role and what that means for leaders. And then Diana said, I will develop a student mindset, always open to learning. Absolutely. So you all know typically from the few episodes we've done that Dr. Juma is going to give you that spiritual aspect. I'm going to give you the corporate leader aspect from sort of the other perspective, right? So I like to stay in my lane. And that is, again, I think is what makes us really powerful. When I'm thinking about helping people keep their ego in check, it dovetails off of something that you said, Dr. Juma, and that is everything begins with understanding. I used to coach and counsel employees, and I would always recognize if we have no meeting of the minds, if there is no understanding, then I cannot help you correct the issue or the problem or the challenge, right? If there is no awareness, then how can you fix something that you don't recognize? Right. So the first thing is recognition. Self-awareness is one of those things that every single leader believes that they're self-aware. In fact, so in a recent study that they did, they asked about self-awareness, and most people say that they think that they're self-aware. In fact, only about 85% of people are not self-aware, right? According to the definition that the researchers were using. So take a step back and understand you may not be viewing yourself from the perspective of others. So self-awareness is really, really important. Ask for feedback. I know it's hard, but when you get outside of your own head, so I like to say, personally, my head is a dangerous place to be, even for me. Right. So being in my head is a dangerous place to be because there's a lot happening in there and not all of it is helpful or useful. So when you get outside and you ask for support, ask for feedback, ask for assistance, you put yourself in a position to really receive the information that's given to you. Shifting, if you are a leader and you're still using a lot of me, I, right? The idea is to shift that to a more collaborative position. It's about we. It's about the team. You can't do it alone and you can't do it by yourself. So, and then the last thing I'll say is develop your emotional intelligence. And this is a really important one because, again, most of us think we are emotionally aware and self-aware when in reality we're not. And even if we are, we're not acting like it. So I'm going to put something here in the chat. And if you want to test your own emotional intelligence, you can visit testmyeq.com. It's a leadership emotional intelligence assessment. It's complimentary. You don't have to pay for it. You get a high level score. Testmyeq.com. You can certainly go out and do the survey on your own. If you don't have a team, if you're not working with employees, it may not fit as much. So just know that because it is a leadership emotional intelligence assessment. But at the end of the day, start with awareness. Oh, and one last thing, desire. If you have a desire to enhance your positive aspects of your ego and minimize the negative aspects of ego, then you can certainly do that as well. So a couple of comments here. Joseph said, I shouldn't stop learning. Never, ever, ever. Never, ever, ever. There is no arrival. There is no destination. We are always on the journey. And Doug, hey, Doug, great to see you, my friend. He says, the Buddha said we need to learn to be comfortable with our own contradictions. And boy, oh boy, I have a lot of those, as I'm sure does everyone else. So that's going to wrap up the main part of our discussion today. Really excited. I want to ask Dr. Juma if there's any final words that you want to share and what you want people to take away from this conversation.
Well, it's been an amazing conversation always, Rhonda. I can't imagine, but I do believe that this is one of the most engaging and also very practical because I can't point at my neighbor. I just have to look at myself,
right,
and how ego is working for or against me. And I think I am personally much helped by this conversation. I know that all of us are talented in one way or another, but you see, talent is only a place of starting. Position is a place of starting. The question will be, are you able to make it, in the best way and bring the best out of that position of leadership, that talent that you are given? I do believe that no one is truly successful because they are, self-absorbed in their importance. You are only successful when you are connected to reality. You are only successful when you are embracing reality. When you are disconnected to reality, you are on the path of a destructive egoism. Facts are always better than the dream that makes you not see anybody but only yourself. So I would say cultivate strength and fortitude by being humble, by being resilient, by being restrained in all that you are engaged in. And definitely by so doing, you will channel your ego in the right direction. And for all of us who are leaders don't let their ego run them. Leaders run their ego. I repeat that. Leaders with understanding of virtue never allow their ego to run them or lead them. They run and lead their ego. So that should be my parting shot, Rhonda. And thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It's so true. So leaders don't let their egos run them. They run their egos, and that's a really important point. And I would say, so Alex said, I should have a desire as a leader. I should embrace teamwork and not just me. Absolutely. Alex said, I'm personally moved and really encouraged with the realistic examples you're using to teach. And then says cultivate strength by being humbled and restrained. Leaders run their ego. Thank you, Dr. Juma. Yeah, I think my parting words in this is it all begins with awareness. So you said that there shouldn't be disconnect from reality. Look around you. Are things working positively for you? Are things moving in your favor? Are people responding to you in a positive way? Is there an arm opening and a reach out to you as opposed to a arm's length and a push away from you? These are all signs of how your ego is sort of being an asset or a liability in your life, right? Take a look around your circumstances, your results that you're getting. And even if you're getting positive results, what's your impact on people, right? Are people responding to you? Are you that magnet for people? Or are you repelling the very people that could serve you and help you be even more successful? It all begins with awareness. It begins by asking the tough questions. It begins by seeking feedback, and it begins by being willing to hear the tough answers. Let me just end with this. No one's going to argue with you about whether your ego is an asset or a liability. So if you ask the question, if you want the information, do so with an open heart and mind and allow people to give you the feedback, because they're not there to argue with you and they have no interest in that. They will rather just walk away and just leave things where they are. So don't put people in an uncomfortable position by asking them a question that you're not ready to hear the answer to. And so with that, I want to just thank all of you for being here. We'll be back in the new year. It will look a little bit different. I will probably not be on with Dr. Juma as much. Hopefully I will participate as I can, as things are taking a bit of a turn for me. But I'm incredibly grateful, humbled, and honored to really have been engaged with these conversations with all of you, and to, be a partner here and a co-host with Dr. Juma. Then the coming year, we're going to be bringing in more special guests, other people who can add their voice as well. So stay tuned. Jeff said, thanks both. And then Alex says awareness should take a look around, be a magnet instead of a repulsive force. No one's going to argue with me, so do so with open heart and mind. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To all of you out there, if you're celebrating the holidays here in the States, we wish you a happy holiday season and a very happy new year. And wherever you are and whatever you're celebrating, right, Dr. Juma? Hey, celebrate and have fun.
Those of you in Kenya, those of you in Africa, across the east, across the west, Merry Christmas in advance and happy, glorious, prosperous 2025. We pray that God keeps you the way He will keep us. Rhonda, you are amazing. Thank you so much for every input. You know very well that LeadVoice, where it was born and its agenda and its goal, even with all the responsibilities that you may have in 2025, I know that your voice, even if you may not appear in the screen, your voice will still be in the LeadVoice. So we're looking forward to have an interesting moment and a very inspiring moment also with different authorities that are leaders with some great wisdom to share with us as we look at 2025. Looking forward.
All right, everybody, take good care, and we'll see you all soon. Don't forget to share the video. This was a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.